The Diaspora Wars are raging, and the question is who or what determines if someone is black? Is it skin color, nationality, heritage, ancestry, or experience? Is the Pope black? Is Oprah black? Is Amber Rose black? Is Sammy Sosa black? Again, you might think that these questions have obvious answers. Oh, but you'd be wrong. My fascination with this question really came to a head about a year ago, shortly after Donald Trump said this.
I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always.
I thought it was an absolutely insane thing to say, so I tweeted these words. Kamala Harris is black. And I thought to myself, there's no way anyone could possibly disagree with me on this extremely basic and accurate take. Oh, but I was wrong. Wishful thinking, I'd say. The response was overwhelming. People insisted that this black woman was not, in fact, a black woman. Her father is a black man. Her paternal grandparents are black. By all accounts, at least one of her great-grandparents was black. And yet, there was a wide-ranging debate about whether or not Vice President Kamala Harris was, in fact, black.
Wow, is Kamala black, yes or no?
If Kamala Harris wins, we really gonna catch hell. You know why? She gonna make us pay for everybody who exposed the fact that she was never black.
I just got one question. When did we question if Kamala Harris was black enough?
Fast forward 1 year later, and while some of the specifics have changed, it's clear that this conversation isn't going anywhere. Before Donald Trump, before Kamala Harris, before Mike Tirico or Babe Ruth, people have been policing color, heritage, and racial status for as long as race has existed. So in this video, I want to dig into all of it, from Rachel Dolezal to Tiger Woods.
What do you call yourself? Do you call yourself African American?
Growing up, I came up with this name. I'm a combination.
A combination.
Caucasian, blue, black, Indian, Asian. Combination.
That's what you call yourself?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the history, the blurred lines, the divisions, the disappointments, the debate itself, and the people keeping that debate alive. To answer this question, I reached out to a couple of people to help me unpack it all.
See, here's the problem. I believe we should be defined as something other than black.
Do you dismiss cultural memory? Do you think you look like the people who are from here? Have you been to Africa? Any part of it?
I just want to say, I knew this was going to happen, and people called me pessimistic.
You know, I'm a child of the one drop rule. I think you are not.
This is the politics of who gets to be black. Let's dig in. This video is sponsored by Ground News. More on that later. So the first group of people I wanted to talk to were the folks insisting that Kamala Harris and other black immigrants are not, in fact, black. Some of them go by the title ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. So last year, in the heat of the Is Kamala Black stuff, I reached out to the leader of their movement, Yvette Carnell.
I am Yvette Carnell. I am president of the ADOS Advocacy Foundation.
I guess I want to start kind of at the heart. Is Vice President Kamala Harris black? Her very active online community has been championing a specific type of black identity politics for a while now. At best, ADOS could be described as hyper-focused on the plight and advancement of black Americans specifically. At worst, they could be described as habitually hostile toward black immigrants. More on that in a bit. The trouble is that somehow this group of professedly pro-black activists sometimes find themselves singing the same xenophobic songs as bigots. Is Vice President Kamala Harris black?
How do you define black? See, here's the problem. Here's the problem that people have. I believe we should be defined as something other than black. And that's why we went to the White House Office of OMB and said, call us ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, the institution. When people hear black, though, when people come to America and they hear black, they think people that come from chattel slavery, sharecropping, Jim Crow, redlining, Fair Housing Act, discrimination. And so American blackness is distinctly different than everywhere else.
To be fair, I don't think that Yvette or the ADOS movement's desire for specificity is wrong. There is real value in naming differences, disaggregating the data a bit. One of the jobs of white supremacy is to flatten, to diminish the rich cultural diversity and history of humanity into a binary of whiteness and non-whiteness. As such, in America, we learn thousands of years of European history with all of its periods and its wars wars and artistic revolutions, all with incredible dynamism and specificity, while non-white people often get flattened into something one-dimensional and other. And I think as a culture, we've been pushing to change that in some really important ways. The truth is that there are beautiful little cultural nuances between, say, South African and Nigerian people, Jamaicans and Trinidadians, Bajans and Black Americans, all Black but all culturally distinct as well. And I think Yvette and the ADOS movement's project, their focus is the need for a way to accurately account for slavery's legacy on the people who descend from the enslaved.
The conversation that we started out having, people haven't followed this, was about wealth. So we tried to figure out, we don't have any wealth as ADOS people. Why? Why are we wealthless and we've been here longer than most people, longer than the Irish, longer than the Italians? How come we don't have wealth? Well, we understand that slavery created a racialized caste in this country. And during Reconstruction, the federal government abandoned us. We had the KKK, we had land theft. And so what we said was, listen, it is the problem and it is the consequence of white racism that we don't have what we're supposed to have. And so part of our project became educating other people about this wealthlessness. And then people started asking us, hey, okay, you keep telling us that we're wealthless. What do we do about it? And so when we said, listen, you're not going to make it up through labor. You can't make it up through work. So part of what our movement does is advocate for reparations. But we also have a transformative Black agenda in terms of housing, in terms of environmental racism, in terms of every space where we need resources. So that's who we are. That's what we stand for.
I gotta be honest with you, this is all profoundly sane. The three basic assertions here are: 1, specificity matters; 2, this country did something uniquely bad to a group of people; and 3, their descendants are still impacted by that bad thing to this day, so we should do something about it. Again, all very, very sane. And yet, is Vice President Kamala Harris Black?
How do you define Black?
There is a disconnect here. I have seen folks online who, when I go to their page, they have ADOS in their bio or whatever the case may be, or maybe they have FBA, you know, whatever.
Yeah, the other thing,
but I have seen folks making claims that she is not African or of African descent or Black specifically. And as the leader of this movement, what do you say to those people?
Well, I understand those people. Because let me say something. You do not have a history of oppression that goes back to slavery, that goes back to Reconstruction, that goes back to sharecropping, Jim Crow, convict leasing. That's not your life. So you have to approach this election, Kamala, in the same way a white woman would, in the same way Elizabeth Warren would, in the same way Hillary Clinton would.
I'm just glad to see other people, like normal, sane people, see it.
That's my friend Olay. You may have seen her around the internet. She's a brilliant political commentator here on YouTube and beyond. And she shared with me that she anticipated this debate about Kamala Harris's Blackness because as a Bahamian Nigerian immigrant to the United States, she'd experienced a sharp rise in these diaspora war tensions.
And I knew it was going to happen because I am a Bahamian Nigerian, so I'm a Caribbean African person. So I know what it is now. I've experienced it now over the last few years of people thinking of a rise of people thinking Blackness is defined by a Black American, a solely Black American experience of all your family had to be Americans, because now I knew it was going to happen, right?
Again, all of this means that Olay has been witnessing the rise of this kind of anti-Black immigrant rhetoric online for a while and has faced online harassment from people who claim to be in the ADOS and FBA movements.
People will comment on my videos and be like, oh my God, I almost love what she was saying until I heard that nasty accent. She thought she was hiding it. Let me get it to you right now. I'd be like, you see this? Mainstream media is spreading propaganda and using Black appearing females like this, aka African, Caribbean, Hispanic, third freeloading invaders as foundational Black Americans when they are not. Don't be fooled by these people. They are lying tethers.
The notion that Black Americans, ADOS, and Black immigrants are not natural political allies obscures the degree to which the worst forms of anti-Blackness are completely unconcerned about when you got to America as a Black person. While Black Americans still face overcriminalization, Black immigrants are also in the crosshairs of this United States government. And I think this story about the Trump administration terminating the temporary protected status of more than 500,000 Haitian immigrants is the perfect place for me to tell you about today's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a website and app that gathers related news articles from more than 50,000 sources around the world, all in one place so that you can compare how different outlets cover the same story. Every story comes with a visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. And if you go to ground.news/garrison or use the link in the video description or scan the QR code on the screen, you'll get 40% off of their Vantage plan. I think a lot of what we're seeing in America right now can be traced back to if, how, and where people are getting their news. 2 people could find themselves looking at the same story and coming to totally different conclusions simply because they got their news from 2 different sources with wildly different commitments to the truth. Take, for example, this story about legal Haitian migrants who are set to lose their temporary protected status. It's been covered by over 200 sources across the political bias spectrum, with most of them in the center. You can also see the ownership and factuality information and compare headlines to see how bias may be affecting framing. This story actually has a very high factuality rating, and surprisingly, across both left-leaning and right-leaning outlets, most of these headlines state the basic facts of what is happening to Haitian migrants. Beyond this story, there is also the blind spot feed, which covers stories underreported by either side of the political spectrum. I think Ground News is a useful tool. They aren't trying to change your opinion about the news. They're simply trying to give you more information about where you may be getting your news and help you see where you may have blind spots. Again, go to ground.news/garrison or use the link in the video description or the QR code on the screen to subscribe today. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off of the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get unlimited access to all of their features. I hope you'll check them out. Thank you to Ground News for supporting this video. Okay, back to the video. Olay explained to me that the rise in anti-immigrant rhetoric that she faces online isn't reflective of her overall experience with Black Americans in America.
Like I tell you, this has gotten extreme over the last 3 years, and I keep trying to make sure I process it. I make sure I take a step back. You know, where is this coming from? This is the next thing. Let me not react to this, because ultimately, I've lived in America now. I've lived in America most of my life. I've been in America longer than I was ever in my own country. I came here when I was 14 in 2008. I would be lying to say that this is my experience of Black Americans or Black America. Like, it's not. I don't think that Black Americans are exceptionally xenophobic. I think xenophobia and this kind of division is fed to us by colonizers. It exists in every Black community, in the entire Black globe, right? Because I was born and raised in the Bahamas, so I knew anti-Blackness and this kind of xenophobia from the jump, because my daddy's Nigerian. So I knew how Bahamians treated and perceived Haitians and Nigerians and all of this. So I know where it comes from. I know that this kind of this is a white supremacist idea that's intentionally been handed to us. And it isn't my experience that Black Americans exceptionally wield that, but it has risen in the last however many years, because I don't think I ever once heard anybody tell me I wasn't Black. I never heard such a crazy nut ass thing like that. Like, Africans and Caribbean people are not Black. Telling people it's so crazy, and having people tell you that you're not Black and they're Black because they descend from slaves who are from Africa, but you are not Black as an African. It's incredible.
And yet,
you do not have a history of oppression that goes back to slavery, that goes back to Reconstruction, that goes back to sharecropping, Jim Crow, convict leasing. That's not your life. So you have to approach this election, Kamala, in the same way a white woman would.
But Kamala Harris isn't a white woman. She is a Black woman. I mean, as you can clearly see, she's Black. Look at her. She's clearly Black. She's doing Black stuff with Black people. It's so obvious. Wait. Hold on. No. Is this a Kamala Harris highlight reel? I mean, look at her. Look at her face right now. Wait a minute. That's not Kamala Harris. Who is that? Is that Haley Steinfeld? Light skin playing Mary in Sinners? No. What is she doing here? Oh my God. She will complicate the conversation. Hey, there was no elegant way for me to make this little detour that we've got to take, but we've got to go over there, and so I'm just gonna say it. Light skins and passing. Yeah, we got to talk about that. To be abundantly clear, I don't think Yvette was getting at the color of Kamala Harris's skin at all, just to clear the air on that. But a number of recent events have reignited a conversation about the blackness of lighter-skinned black people, and I think we should talk about it. From TikTok trends and the Pope's ancestry to, of course, Ryan Coogler's very successful vampire thriller Sinners. Among all of the discourse about the complexities of culture, religion, and life in the Jim Crow South that movie touched on, one of the topics of discussion was the question of whether or not the character Mary was black. The character, like Haley Steinfeld in real life, had black ancestry, but the character clearly walked through life as a white woman, what is historically known as passing. The history of passing is weird. It exists entirely because white people were so obsessed with race that they'd police whether or not a person had any black ancestry whatsoever. If so, the notorious one-drop rule would go into effect and qualify that person to face at least some of the social indignities of blackness, even if they looked white. I say some because there were certainly privileges to having lighter skin, that proximity to whiteness mattered. But all of this led to the rise of passing, when a person who otherwise would be considered white would actively or passively hide the fact that they had a black person in their family tree.
When you meet the guy from Pitt, don't tell him you're colored, okay?
Don't tell him.
Don't bring it up. You're neither one thing nor the other.
My grandfather was African American and passed white.
Sometimes these people wouldn't even know that they had a black ancestor. They were like several generations into passing and genuinely thought that they were white. And maybe they were, I don't know. But of course, the investigators were out and the rumor mills were strong. At one point, white people were searching through obituaries to prove that white passing folks in their communities were actually mixed race and therefore black. Passing was precarious because it was frowned upon on both sides of the racial divide. Obviously, white folks didn't like it. But for some black folks, it felt like the passing person was ashamed to be what or who they really were.
I did pretty much all my life look at her and think, you look like a black woman to me.
Wow.
But it was not something that was really spoken about. Like, she then did tell me about some incidents of pretty ugly racism towards her and her father when she was a kid. And she told me that she asked him once and he just looked at the floor and said, you know, I did it all for you.
Fast forward to today, and all of this begs the question about whether or not light-skinned people with distant or diluted black ancestry are in fact black, or if they are missing some key experiential or ancestral component.
But I'm quite sure you could perhaps imagine that there have been times when folks have tried to revoke my card, right?
That's historian and legal scholar Martha S. Jones. As a fair-skinned black woman who studies and teaches black history for a living, I wanted her perspective on this tension.
You know, if your mother's white, you're not black. You marry a white person, you're not, like all, we have many tests, and many qualifiers.
She recently wrote a book about the social complexities of her light skin and family history that I think captures the trouble of racial categories in America.
One of the things that this book gave me was, I think a healthy sense of humor, right, about how twisted that is and how we are caught in a set of twisted logics, maybe even untruths, right, about who we are as humans, and we call that race.
I'm going to ask you straight up, like who gets to be black? Like, what qualifies a person to be black?
One way to capture my view is to say, there are no cards. There's nobody giving out cards. There's nobody, to snatch your card. You don't have a card, because that metaphor, right, is about our self-policing and our self-regulation of blackness. Similarly, I don't think that the census gets to tell us who we are by virtue of its boxes and all the things. And so I think that blackness is a negotiation, right, between, our own histories our own contexts on the one hand, and the kind of sociological norms that are swirling around. You know, I'm a child of the one drop rule. I think you are not, right? You are a child of the mixed race possibility, and that means that my blackness will always be in some ways different from yours, and my blackness is unshakable.
I think that Dr. Jones makes a good point that the complexities of the human experience, blackness notwithstanding, are too varied to fall neatly into the rigid categories that make up race, which I think gets to a deeper, far more existential question in this entire debate. The animating question in all of this is who gets to be a part of the group? But that question assumes that there is a group, that there is some collective identity to gatekeep in the first place. Not to get all existential, but like, what is black? Who is black? Why is black? I asked Yvette if she saw value in collective black identity, if, in her estimation, the Pan-African solidarity exhibited by people of African descent across the globe was useful anymore.
I think the idea of blackness is antiquated. Let me just be honest. I think the idea of just African descent is antiquated, right? And what is the benefit, and what is the impact, and what impacts you most? You come from, if you say I come from Africa, that's a continent, landmass, 54 countries. How are you in any way tied to Africa?
This really struck me. I found it to be incredibly interesting, and I respectfully disagree with Yvette on this point. It's actually something that Yvette said herself earlier in our conversation that helped to solidify my perspective on this. She was talking about the ADOS movement's policy platform on their website.
But we also have a transformative black agenda in terms of housing, in terms of environmental racism, in terms of every space where we need resources.
And in that portion of the conversation, she cited these two black experiences: the inherited experience and the lived experience of blackness.
Every space where we need resources. So I think when people try to understand us, and that part of it does include black immigrants, because that is part of your lived experience in this country, is discrimination. The inherited experience, though, of being Black American, which is ADOS, is only us. So that's who we are. That's what we stand for.
I think Yvette is 100% right. There is a unique inherited experience that I know all too well to be true in my family. My Nana, who is alive and well and as beautiful as ever, she worked as the help in the homes of racist white people in the 50s and 60s. Her parents were born to sharecroppers in rural Georgia, just a step away from slavery. When she was a little girl, she knew old people in their 80s and 90s who had been slaves. Her entire educational life was spent in segregated schools. She wasn't covered under the protections of the Fair Housing Act until she was almost 30 years old. And it's not just my grandparents. My parents were born into a segregated world. If we're being really real, I was born into a segregated world. And when I have kids, they are very likely to be born into a segregated world themselves. Those are the inherited or lineage-based realities that Yvette was referring to. I fully believe in my own agency, but I am also aware that my life has been impacted, if not shaped in some ways, by the fact that my ancestors were enslaved and marked as permanently inferior. Those things have had compounding downstream consequences for access and wealth building and social dignity, just to name a few. But there is also, as Yvette points out, a lived experience of blackness that isn't tied solely to ADOS lineage. Black immigrants may be shielded from some things, but in a racist country, the color of their skin also marks them for certain indignities. Take, for example, my friend Errol, a black man who is the son of black immigrants from Jamaica. His parents came to America to get college degrees, something that 70% of black Americans or ADOS people don't have, and many don't have access to. Now, don't get me wrong, Errol's parents weren't wealthy or particularly privileged, but his parents were allowed into this country because they were seen as on the upswing. They were seen as potentially valuable. And yet, his Jamaican heritage didn't save him from being racially profiled when we got pulled over by an aggressive cop in the backwoods of Tennessee during our time in college together. Errol's Jamaicanness wasn't a consideration when Georgia Republicans closed polling precincts in his majority black neighborhood, which is why West Indian and African black folks stood side by side with black American civil rights leaders to fight for the rights of all black people in America. Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture, for example, wasn't ADOS, but he understood the importance of black solidarity and black power, which is notable because it isn't lost on me that some black immigrants do come to America having absorbed white supremacist narratives about black Americans. What is the utility of a collective black identity?
I mean, there's so much, right? I mean, like in a commonsensical way, right? Like power in numbers, power in voice, power in being able to ask, to be able to leverage for things, right? I think now is a better time than ever before for us to address it and maybe put a halt to these kinds of conversations in the community and recognize how a lot of this is steeped in white supremacy and an American exceptionalism, and one that is meant not to help us. Because now you have that's what it's based in. It's these white supremacists who want to divide the black community, right?
I actually encountered the ADOS movement for the very first time about 5 years ago. I was at the June 2019 congressional hearing on reparations in Washington, D.C. The hearing was led by the late Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who was an outstanding advocate for black people and was the child of Jamaican immigrants. Ta-Nehisi Coates was one of the panelists at this hearing, and he said something extraordinary that I think about often.
There is no way to get out of this. There is no way of escaping this without a direct confrontation.
He was responding to the toxic and divisive rhetoric that pits black immigrants and native-born black Americans against each other.
You've pointed out that black Bostonians of American ancestry had a median household wealth of $8 in that, but Caribbean ancestry had $12,000 of wealth. Talks to the disparity. I just wonder if you'd comment on the implications of that.
And so, for instance, it was just said by one of my fellow committee members that there is a difference between the incomes of Caribbean black immigrants and native blacks. This is true. It's also quite understandable.
It's a fact that black immigrants on average have better economic and educational outcomes than your average native-born black American. That is a fact. But what Coates is saying is that there are other factors at play.
People who come to America to pursue opportunity generally tend to do better than the masses of a whole group that have been here. This is true of all immigrants, so this is not particularly surprising. But what happens when you look at that second generation? What happens when you look at that third generation of Caribbean blacks? In fact, unlike all other groups, they quickly become African American blacks in terms of their other statistics. Why is that? It's the weight of history. It's the implicit idea that is codified in our laws, in our criminal justice system, in the very places that we live to this very day. There is no way to get out of this. There is no way of escaping this without a direct confrontation, without HR 40, the very reason we're here.
I find that remarkable. The point is that the totality of my immigrant friends' black experiences are different from mine, no doubt, but they are still black experiences in ways that overlap with mine. And what Coates is explaining is that overlapping area gets bigger and bigger with every generation. So much so that within just a few generations, our outcomes are the same. Precisely because the negative outcomes that get weaponized against black Americans had little to do with mindset or drive or victim mentality, and they had everything to do with living in communities that are by design hostile to your very existence. My point is that our fates as black people are intrinsically tied together. That black liberation thinkers like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. were right for advancing a Pan-African vision of black solidarity. When the Black Power movement rose to prominence in the late 1960s, the subtext of that movement was the realization that black peoples, though our experiences may have varied from country to country and continent to continent, we were all caught in a global system that placed them, us, at the bottom of the social caste system everywhere.
How are you in any way tied to Africa? Have you been to Africa? Any part of it? When did we stop being African? So if we were, again, African for this long, you mean to tell me that right here is when we stopped? Okay, give me the date. Was it when we got off the boat? Were we no longer African then? Despite speaking African languages? Despite our hair, our style of existence, our dress, our food, our way of being, our culture, did we step off the boat in chains and were we then no longer African? Were our babies from that first generation born to Africans, not African because they were born here? So your mother was born there and then you gave birth here. So was the first generation of Africans who were born here, were they not African even though their parents were born on the continent? What's the date?
That's Dr. Adjoa B. Asamoah. She's the award-winning social impact strategist who developed the legislative strategy for the Crown Act. And she went on to establish the nation's first Office of African American Affairs for the Biden administration. But as the daughter of a Ghanaian father and an African American or ADOS mother, she has a foot in both of these worlds.
I am the embodiment of Pan-Africanism. My mother was born in North Carolina. My father was born in what would become the Republic of Ghana. By the time I was 9 years old, I had gone to the birthplace of my mother, meaning down south, where it's so dark still, no street lights, where you can't even see your hand in front of your face because it's that dark. And again, I had been to now what is called the Republic of Ghana, and I realized that anti-Blackness is a global sentiment. When I went to the birthplace of my father, I went to what is called the door of no return. And for anybody who does not recognize that Africa is our homeland, I challenge those people to go to that place and feel nothing. I have never met anyone, independent of where the person was born, who was Black, who did not go to that place and weep.
I think this is why Black liberation thinkers like Malcolm X were so committed to a Pan-African vision of global Black solidarity.
The Organization of Afro-American Unity sees the only hope for the Black man in America in a strong Africa.
For me, I'm always challenged by this idea that we focus on our differences, and that is not to dismiss the fact that there are distinctions. But I'm challenged by this embrace of Eurocentrism, which seeks to focus on the differences, not in a celebratory way, but as a tool to divide versus understanding the cultural ties that bind us.
From apartheid in South Africa and Brazil to segregation in the US and UK, our most respected and revered Black political leaders knew that there was power in uniting a global movement for collective Black liberation.
And so the Organization of Afro-American Unity has a program to link the Afro-Americans with the Africans and the Africans with the Afro-Americans. When I say Afro-Americans, I mean those throughout the entire Western Hemisphere. This is our only hope. Our hope is in a strong Africa. And when Africa is strong, our position in America will be one of respect. But if Africa is weak, we will never be in a position of respect in America.
Black solidarity across difference is powerful and politically necessary. No, our experiences aren't the same, but they don't have to be. Okay, I'm going to call it there. This is a huge topic, so thank you so much for watching and for liking this video and for subscribing. I'd love to know what you think about this debate. Nothing about this conversation is new, and I feel like we really only got to scratch the surface on a few of the elements here. So I'm sure you have thoughts, and I'd love to know what those thoughts are, so be sure to let me know down in the comments. I'm down there right now reading comments, so let me know. I'm gonna read your comment. I'll see what you're saying. And I want to know. I want the feedback. I recently launched a newsletter on Substack called Tip Line, where I go after answers to your questions, usually with historians and scholars and friends. I'll also be sharing scripts and extended cuts of my interviews over there. So go subscribe to be the first to know. I think that's it. Subscribe, drop a like. Those things really do make a difference. As always, I am grateful that you are here, my friends. Until next time. Peace.